In episode 10, the conclusion picks up where part 4 left off. Thanks to Snarf and the Thundercats, they managed to rescue Snarfer, who's Snarf's nephew. That's the good news. So now that the Thundercats have made their escape, so now, back at the Pyramid's Tomb Chamber, Mumm-ra now has a plan to eliminate all 11 Thundercats. So, Mumm-ra told his canine companion, listen to me. I have a plan. Now you're probably wondering back in part 4, what was Mumm-ra's plan? So he said he has to come up with a plan, and that involves the Lunatacs to plan a trap for the Thundercats. So he flies from the tomb chamber to Sky Tomb. But in the meantime, someone has to guard the pyramid, so Mumm-ra stays behind. So meanwhile, in the Tower of Omen's generator room, that's when Snarf saw that his nephew shows up. So Snarf says, what took you so long? Well, Snarfer hesitated. So then Snarf says, never mind. Did you pressurize the gauges like I told you to? Of course I did, Snarfer said. Well, the pressure I should be up to 90, Snarf said. Really? Snarfer says, with a generator this small? Well, at first Snarf hesitated to answer his nephew's question and says, well, I was just testing you, that's all. But then Snarf realizes, oh my goodness, I forgot to hook up the communications for Cat's lair. And so he rushes off. But before Snarf can leave the room, that's when Snarfer just let slip to his uncle to say, don't worry about it. I took care of that already, he said. The Snarfer says, wait, there's some even better news. Lionel and Panthro are talking to each other in the tower's control room right now. Well, in Snarfer's defense, he's not wrong, because in the control room, there's Lionel talking to Panthro in the control room of the tower. So, back with Lionel, he just told Panthro, listen to me. If we need to come up with a plan, we need to find a way to beat the Lunatacs, and we need to do it fast, he said. So, even though Panthro at the Castler's control room had agreed with Lionel's suggestion, he says, as a matter of fact, since we're on our way to the tower right now, we can discuss the plan together, he suggested. So, meanwhile, in Sky Tomb, and in the furnace room, we have Red Eye of the Lunatacs. And that's when two more showed up, which are Tugmug and Chilla. So Red Eye told Chilla and Tugmug that they can get rid of the slaves since now the fuel feed is on automatic. But then out of nowhere, Mumm-ra just told Red Eye, absolutely not. And then Chilla has her turn to ask a question. Why not? Who needs them anyhow? Well, Tugmug, who agrees with Chilla and says, well, we're better off without them anyway. Besides, they're dead weight to us. Then Mumm-ra told the Lunatics, Chilla, Tugmug, and Red Eye that the reason why the slaves are needed anyway is because they're bait for the Thundercats. Now Red Eye has his turn to ask a question. Did you say bait? So Red Eye says, so let me get this straight. You mean to say that the Thundercats will try to rescue them? He asked. Even though Tugmug agrees with Red Eye, but then he says, well, those slaves are worthless anyhow. Well, Mumm-ra has his turn to plead his case. Well, that may be true, but as everyone knows, these Thundercats will try anything to rescue their friends. And of course, he's not wrong. And you can be rest assured of that. So meanwhile, back at the Tower of Omens, now that everybody else, including Lino and Linkso, are in the tower's control room, they decided to discuss a plan. Well, Panthro goes first to speak in his case to say there's no way they can handle Skytomb unless they get all their friends out of there first. Now, Lionel, who agrees with Panthro, he says, you're right, that is a problem. And of course, Lionel also agrees that this is indeed a worst case scenario. Then Chitara has her turn to speak in her case to say there's a bigger problem, and that would be Mumm-ra, because Tigra went next to speak in his case to agree with her. Then Chitara also says, true, we may not have seen him, but I know he's around here somewhere. Then Linkso has his turn to make a suggestion. Well, I guess there's only one way to know for sure. So Linkso says in his case, well, the rest of the Thundercats knew that the only way to know that he's around is if they see him. But according to what Linkso said in his case, that himself and Chitara didn't have to see him to know that he's around somewhere. So Linkso suggested that he and Chitara will take the Thunderclaw to the Black Pyramid. And he said, if Mumm-ra is alive there somewhere, then the rest of you will know about it. Good idea, Lionel said. Then Lionel suggested that Bengali should stay behind at the tower. But Bengali doesn't like that idea and says, but I'll miss all the action. Then Nixon says, no, Bengali, Lionel's right. We all have a role in the part to play in this. Besides, Lionel is the lord of the Thundercats after all. And of course, he's not kidding. So after Linkso had pleaded his case to say that the kittens have their duty at Cat's Lair right now, and now Panthro has his turn to plead his case to agree with Linkso. He says, Bengali, listen, since this tower is not fully operational right now, besides, you're needed right here. Besides, you'll be needed when the day's over, he suggested. So Bengali finally agrees with Panthro's suggestion and Lionel's decision. So, in the meantime, the rest of the Thundercats will go to Dark Side to try to get the Sky Tomb and free the slaves. So, long story short, the first two Thundercats to leave the tower were Linkso and Chitara and the Thunderclaw, while the rest are in the Thunder Tank and they're heading to Sky Tomb. So, back with the Thunderclaw with Chitara and Linkso, they had arrived at the Black Pyramid. So after the Thunderclaw has circled around a little bit, that's when Chitara made a suggestion with Linkso that the only way to know for sure if Mumm-ra is alive or not is to go inside. So they decided to land the Thunderclaw. So back with the Thunder Tank that had just arrived at the canyon, that's the good news. And according to Lionel, they should reach the opening at any time. Besides Lionel, there are other Thundercats that are with him, Panthro, Palmyra, and Tigra. So, what was Panthro's idea? To turn on the fog lights that he suggested back in part 2, when he and the rest of the Thundercats were at the Burble Village. So Panthro told Lionel, I do hope these lights work. Don't worry, Lionel said to Panthro, they will. So Panthro turned on the fog lights for the tank. Well, good news, they work. Because Lionel said in his case, and he's not kidding, there's nothing that Panthro couldn't invent that will never work. So, thanks to Panthro's fog lights on the Thunder Tank, they made it inside the canyon's opening. So, long story short, back with Linkso and Chitara that were inside of the pyramid, but they found it weird that it was empty. But wait, Linkso just felt something on the floor, with his foot, of course. And then when Linkso picked it up, he realizes that this is a talisman. It's strange that it ended up in a place like this, Linkso said to Chitara. So back with the Thunder Tank, now it had arrived at Darkside, the four of the Thunder Tanks got out of the tank. So he said to Tigra, Panthro, and Palmyra to say, listen, we can cover more ground if we split up. So that's what they did. So long story short, after Lionel and the others had agreed to meet back at the tank in 2 hours, back at Sky Tomb, in the control room we have Mumm-ra telling everyone, the Lunatacs that is, that the Thundercats are here. But how can this be? Red Eye asked. The sensors are not picking up anything. Well, it just so happens, Mumm-ra said to Red Eye, that he had pleaded his case to say he had lived for 1,000 years and he doesn't need any technology or sensors or anything else. So after Mumm-ra had pleaded his case to say, I'm telling you, the Thundercats are on their way right now. They're coming. So that convinces Luna, the leader, to tell everyone. Then Luna says, if that's the case, if the Thundercats are coming here, what do you say we welcome them, shall we? And so three of them, Red Eye, Chilla, and Alluro, were the first to step out of Sky Tomb. So meanwhile, back with Tigra, the Thundercats, he didn't even realize that he was spotted by Red Eye of the Lunatacs. So long story short, thanks to Red Eye's infrared in his disc, that's when Tiger goes face to face from down below with Red Eye of the Lunatacs. So Red Eye asked the question, "Are you looking for me?" So Tigra goes one on one with Red Eye. So what Tigra did first is that he makes himself invisible with his bolo whip. But unfortunately for Tiger, he didn't even realize is that he even is invisible, but that doesn't mean Red Eye shouldn't see him. So Red Eye did, with his infrared vision, of course. So long story short, thanks to Red Eye's disc on his chest, he uses it on Tiger, and then he was set on fire. So then Red Eye said, "So you're looking for Sky Tomb, right? I'll do more than that. I'll take you there." So back with Linkso and Chinchara at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, they found it strange that it was empty. Well, except for Mumm-ra's sidekick, Mahmud. So when Chitara said to Linkso, "I don't think Mumm-ra's here. This place is empty." "I have the feeling you're right," Linkso said. But then suddenly Mahmud, who's Mumm-ra's sidekick, comes out of the sarcophagus to attack Chitara and Linkso. So, long story short, things are looking bad for Linkso and Chitara when they were surrounded by Mumm-ra's statues and his canine sidekick. So, long story short, after Chitara and Linkso had dodged Muhammad's attack, that's when Chitara saw that the ancient spirits of evil statues are behind Linkso. So she says, "Watch out!" So he turns around and he does what any good guy would do: show them the talisman that he found earlier, thanks to Chitara. So thanks to the talisman that blinded Muhammad for a while, it was time for Chitara and Linkso to get out of the pyramid by using the same talisman. And so they did. And next thing you know, both Linkso and Chitara ended up outside of the pyramid. So Chitara says, "What's going on? What happened?" So even though Linkso said he isn't sure of it, but whatever's going on, the talisman he found earlier must have some kind of power, a life force, if you will. So long story short, meanwhile back at Darkside with Panthro, he couldn't find Sky Tomb anywhere, or so he thought. But when he came back to the Thunder Tank, he didn't even notice that a Laurel of the Lunatics was inside of it. So Panthro pleaded his case with a Laurel to say, "You got a lot of nerve. Get out of that tank." "Oh, just relax," the Laurel said. "You won't be needing it, not where you're going," he said. So long story short, after Panthro was about to go one-on-one with Alluro does what he knows best. He decides to hypnotize him. So long story short, thanks to Alluro's mind control, he captures Panthro, just like what Tigra did when he was captured by Red Eye. So meanwhile, back with Pumira, well, good news, she found Sky Tomb, but then a voice comes out of nowhere from behind her that says, "Welcome to Darkside. It's Chilla of the Lunatics." So Pumira goes one-on-one with Chilla. So after Palmyra had dodged every attack that Chilla did, that was until at last, bad news for Palmyra, she gets frozen in ice, thanks to Chilla. Because why not? Chilla does what she knows best. So meanwhile back with Lino, he was unaware of what just happened moments ago. That was until the Sword of Omens told Lino what was wrong. So just like what any good guy would do, Lino looks through his sword's eye, and what he saw shocks him. Palmyra frozen in ice thanks to Chilla, Tigra on fire thanks to Red Eye, and of course Panthro hypnotized thanks to Orluro. So Lionel knows what to do, but before he can summon a Thundercat signal from his sword, he heard a voice from nearby saying, "Help me! Help me!" So Lionel goes over to see where the voice was coming from, and it's coming from behind the bushes. So there he sees Luna. So Lionel puts his sword down and picks up Luna and asks her, "Are you okay? What happened?" But then the sword told Lionel that there was something or someone coming from behind. It's Otmok. It was a trick. So Otmok does what he knows best. He uses super strength. So as Otmok continues to use his super strength against Lionel, I guess Lionel should have realized that it was all part of Luna's plan. So long story short, after four of the Thundercats gets captured by the Lunatacs, back with Linkso and Chitara, who had just left the pyramid moments ago in the Thunderclaw, that's when Chitara sensed that there was something wrong, and so she told Linkso about it. So long story short, after Ogmok was told by Luna after praising him for a job well done, is taking Lionel to Sky Tomb, back with Linkso and Chitara, now that they knew that there was something wrong, but luckily for her, she managed to maintain control of the Thunderclaw. So Linkso asked her what happened, and that's when Chitara explains that Lionel's in serious trouble, and then by now he and the others are at Sky Tomb, and she said that she felt it. So before heading off the dark side, that's when Linkso made a suggestion to Chitara to contact Bengali, the Thunder Kittens, and the two Snarfs. Oh, don't worry, they'll show up later, and tell them what happened. Although Chitara agrees, but she's getting worried. She says, "We don't have time for that." And of course, there's a bigger problem because according to Chitara, she says unless all the fog lights are equipped to the vehicles, there's no way that any Thundercats is going through the forest of mist without them. So Chitara suggested to Linkso to help her guide through it, but Linkso says that he doesn't have a braille board with him. And Chitara says, "Well, then I guess that's the chance we'll have to take. I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll go slow and you just give me the directions," she suggested. And so off they went. So anyway, long story short, back at Sky Tomb, now that all four of the Thundercats have been captured thanks to the Lunatacs, Luna, who's the leader, had congratulated everyone for a job well done, and then said, "You see what happens when we work together? It really paid off," she said. Of course, after Luna made her cases, teamwork is what counts, and that's when Alluro pleaded his case to say, "Well, that may be so, but teamwork has nothing to do with it." The reason why Alluro said that is because, as everybody knows, he said, the Thundercats are no match for us Lunatics. And of course, he's not kidding. And then Red Eye has his turn to plead his case to say how primitive Thundercats are, as well as the mutants. Now Chilla, who agrees with Red Eye, then pleads her case to say they have a notion of following the code of truth, justice, honor, and loyalty. Tugmug, who agrees with Chilla, then pleads his case to say how worthless the Thundercats are. Though Luna agrees with Tugmug, then pleads her case to insult them, to say how incompetent and the conceited fools that they are. Then suddenly, Mumm-ra shows up out of nowhere to agree with Luna and said, "You know something? She's correct." Mumm-ra also agrees with Luna that the Thundercats shouldn't be underestimated, but saw, in his case, that they only captured four of them, the Lunatacs that is, so there's only seven left to catch. So long story short, back with Linkso and Chitara on the Thunderclaw, they were trying to hurry and to get to Sky Tomb so that they could rescue their friends. Well, good news, thanks to Linkso, he manages to guide Chitara through the forest of mist, and without a problem, although despite a couple setbacks on the way. So long story short, back in Sky Tomb, Red Eye just heard the alarm going off and then told the others that there are Thundercats heading their way. But what the Lunatics didn't know is that before they could do anything about it, the Thunderclaw punched through the wall of Sky Tomb, and out first was Chitara, and next is Linkso. So long story short, back with Lino, after he was watching the battle going on, he was desperately trying to break the chains with his super strength. But then, long story short, when Lino found out that his sword was missing, that's because he accidentally left it behind earlier. So he tries to call his sword the best way he knew how, and then Mumm-ra looked over his shoulder to look at Lino of what he is doing. He said, "Stop them!" Unfortunately for the Lunatics, they couldn't do a thing about it. That's because Back with the Sword is now on its way to Lino inside Sky Tomb. So by the time that the sword went into Lino's hand, when meanwhile back at Sky Tomb, Lino broke through the chains. So back with the Lunatacs, after they found out that Lino had broke free from the chains, they couldn't believe it. They were in shock. So Lionel knows what to do. He does what any good guy would do, project a Thundercat signal from his sword. So that's what he did. So back with the three Thundercats, one was Panthro, who was no longer hypnotized. He broke free from his nunchucks. Next is Tigra. He's no longer on fire. He was next to see the signal. And last to see it was Pumira, and she's no longer frozen in ice. So long story short, after the six Thundercats had banded together for a fight, well, except for Lionel, he's face to face with Mumm-ra. And then, long story short, Lionel does what any good guy would do. He uses his claw shield to make Mumm-ra see his own reflection. Now, usually it works, but this time it doesn't. Now, the reason why the reflection didn't work is because Momo just let slip to Lino to tell him that the agent spirits had earlier had revived him, and when they did, that means no longer will reflection will harm him. Then, long story short, after Momra had pleaded his case to say how powerful that he is twice as ever and nothing's going to stop him, and etc., but on the contrary, Linkso has the talisman that he found earlier at the pyramid that blocked his powers. So Linkso, after he survived unharmed, he pleaded his case with Momra to say, it'll never work as long as I have this talisman, and he shows it to Momra. And what Mumm-ra saw was unbelievable. The light from the talisman's power had blinded him. So, long story short, after Linksel's friends saw what had happened and what Linksel was doing, they were in awe. In fact, they were surprised. Finally, when Mumm-ra realized that he could never stand a chance against the talisman's power and that its light had blinded him, Mumm-ra had no choice but to flee the scene, and so he flew off. So after Mumm-ra had fled the scene, Allura of the Lunatacs goes first to explain in his case how powerful the talisman works. Even Chilla agrees with him. So both Allura and Chilla had pleaded their cases to say they can use the talisman against Mumm-ra, and of course Tugmug happens to agree with both Chilla and Allura. So after Tugmug had pleaded his case to say he should rule Third Earth and along with his friends, even Red Eye agrees with him, and he said he must have the talisman. So Link so happens to agree to give it to them. It said if you want it, you can have it. And so they did, and they ended up arguing on who's getting what and etc. So long story short, that's when Panthro told everyone, I think it's about time we all get out of here. Good idea, Linus said. So everybody left Sky Tomb in the Thunder Tank. Now I can't really say for sure if the Thundercats really got their friends out of there or not, so it's kind of confirmed that they did. So, anyway, meanwhile back at the Tower of Omens, in the tower's control room we have Panthro, Chitara, Tigra, Palmyra, Lino, and let's not forget Bengali and the Thunder Kittens. Told you we'd get back to them later. And that's when Panthro goes first to speak in his case to say that was too close of a call. Oh, let's not forget Linkso. He's there too. So even though Tiger agrees with Panthro and says if there's anything that us Thundercats can do, the Lunatics can do even better. And of course the kittens, the Thunderkittens that is, happens to agree with him. Then Wily Cat and his sister had pleaded their cases to say how they're stuck at Cat's Lair doing guard duties instead of joining in on the fun. And Big Alley had to miss that too when he happens to agree with the Thunder Kittens. Now, just a minute, Linksel says when it's his turn to plead his case. We are a team, after all, and that's part of our strength. He's not kidding. And of course, Chitara, who happens to agree with him, and then she has her turn to plead her case to say we all have a role and a part to play. She's not kidding. So the two Snarfs, both Snarf and his nephew, told you we'd get back to them later, they pleaded their cases to agree with Chitara. Now, Palmyra, who happens to agree with Snarf and his nephew, then pleads her case to say it's too bad that the Lunatics cannot do the exact same way. I'm sure that they will, Lionel said, when he happens to agree with her. And when they do, we will be ready for whatever comes across, he said. He's not kidding. So we know what this means. The Thundercats will be prepared no matter what. Now with their friends are being rescued and the bad guys being defeated for now anyway. So who knows what kind of tricks that the bad guys will be pulling next. So that ends episode 10 and part 5.